Story 1. The Wall Clock. When my grandfather died last year, I inherited several things from his house. Antique furniture, family photographs, some books. But what caught my attention the most was his wall clock. It was a beautiful piece, made of dark oak wood, with golden Roman numerals and a bronze pendulum that made a deep, constant tick-tock. My grandfather had been a man of routines. He always got up at 6 in the morning, had breakfast at 7, dinner at 8 in the evening, and that clock had marked every moment of his life for more than 40 years. I hung it in my living room, right above the couch. I thought it would be a nice memory of him, a way to keep him present. The first night, the tick-tock kept me awake. I wasn't used to that constant sound. It's funny how something so rhythmic can become disturbing in the silence of the early morning. Tick-tock, tick-tock, like a heart beating in the darkness. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, when I went down for breakfast, I noticed something strange. The clock had stopped. The hands marked exactly 3:33 a.m. I set it to the right time again, thinking that maybe it needed winding or the battery was low. But it was an old clock with a manual mechanism. My grandfather wound it every Sunday morning. I wound it. The pendulum started moving again. Tick-tock, tick-tock. But the next morning, the clock was stopped again at 3:33 a.m. This repeated for a whole week. No matter how much I wound it, no matter what I did, every morning it was stopped at the exact same time. I took the clock to a watchmaker. He examined it thoroughly. He told me the mechanism was in perfect condition, that there was no reason for it to stop. It's a quality clock, he said. It should work another 40 years without problems. But it kept stopping, always at 3:33. One night, frustrated and curious, I decided to stay awake to see what happened exactly at that hour. I sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, watching the clock, waiting. The hours passed slowly. Midnight, 1 in the morning, 2, 3. At 3:32, I noticed that the tick-tock began to change. It became slower, heavier, as if time itself was thickening. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Each second seemed to last an eternity. At exactly 3:33, the pendulum stopped completely. The silence that followed was absolute, oppressive. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Someone was coming down the stairs behind me. Slow, deliberate steps, like those of an elderly person, carefully going down each step. My heart raced. I lived alone. There was no one else in the house. The footsteps continued. They reached the bottom of the stairs. They approached the couch where I was sitting. I didn't dare turn around. I was paralyzed. The footsteps stopped right behind me. I could feel a presence. Something was there, standing, watching me. I felt cold breath on the back of my neck, a breath that smelled of old medicine and mothballs, the smell of my grandfather's house. And then, a voice, weak, raspy, my grandfather's voice. "I always liked this clock," he whispered. "It kept me company. It marked my time, my life." I closed my eyes tight. This couldn't be happening. "But now my time is over," the voice continued, "and the clock doesn't know what to do. It keeps looking for me." At 3:33, the time I died, the clock started sounding again. Tick-tock, tick-tock, as if nothing had happened. When I finally gathered the courage to turn around, there was no one, just the empty living room and the clock marking the time. I investigated. I called my aunt. I asked her what exact time my grandfather had died. At 3:33 in the morning, she told me. We found him in the morning, sitting in his chair in front of that clock he loved so much. I tried to get rid of the clock. I took it to an antique shop. I sold it. I felt relieved. But 3 days later, when I came home from work, the clock was back in my living room, hanging in the same place. I tried again. I donated it to a church. The following week, it appeared at my door. Someone had left it there, wrapped with a note. "We believe this is yours." Now I no longer try to get rid of it. I learned to live with the constant tick-tock, with the clock that stops every early morning and every night at 3:33 a.m. I hear those footsteps coming down the stairs, but I no longer turn around. I'm no longer afraid because I recognize those footsteps. They're my grandfather's coming to check his clock, to make sure it's still working, taking care of what was his in life, and now in death. Story 2. The Neighbor's Window. I live in an apartment building right in the city center. It's one of those old buildings from the 60s with large windows and narrow hallways. My apartment is on the 4th floor, and my living room window looks directly at another building, identical to mine, separated by only about 10 meters. During the first 2 years I lived there, the apartment across from me, the one directly facing my window, was empty. The curtains always closed, never a light on, no movement. According to the doorman, the owner had died and his heirs couldn't agree on what to do with the property. So there it remained, abandoned, collecting dust. I got used to that empty window. It was like a blank canvas in front of me. Sometimes, when I worked late, I would look over there and imagine who would eventually live there. A young couple perhaps, or a student, someone I could wave to from afar. Everything changed 3 months ago. One night, I came home from work around 11. I turned on my living room lights, and as always, my gaze went to the window across from me. The curtains were open, and there was someone standing there, a man, looking in my direction. I was surprised, but also pleased. Finally, someone was living there. I raised my hand to wave. The man didn't respond. He just stood there, motionless. Well, maybe he didn't see me, I thought. I closed my curtains and continued with my nightly routine. But the next night, when I got home, the man was there again, in the exact same position, standing in front of the window, staring. This time, I didn't wave. There was something strange about his posture, too rigid, too still. For the next 2 weeks, every time I looked out my window, there he was. It didn't matter what time, 10 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, midnight. Always in the same place, in the same position. I never saw him move, never saw him blink, just staring. I started to feel uncomfortable. Who stands in front of a window for hours without moving? Was he specifically watching me? I talked to the doorman. He told me no one new had moved in, that the apartment was still empty, according to his records. Impossible, I said. There's someone there. I see him every day. The doorman frowned. Let me check, he said. He called the administration of the other building. After a long conversation, he hung up and looked at me seriously. That apartment is still closed. No one has the keys except the bank. There can't be anyone living there. But I knew what I had seen. That night, I decided to investigate further. I got out some old binoculars I had stored away and waited for it to get dark. At 10 at night, the lights in the apartment across were still off. But in the darkness, I could make out the silhouette. There it was, as always. I focused the binoculars, adjusted the sharpness, and observed carefully. What I saw made me drop the binoculars. It wasn't a person, it was a mannequin. One of those mannequins they use in clothing stores, dressed in normal clothes, artificially standing in front of the window. I laughed nervously. Someone had put that mannequin there as a joke. Maybe the apartment's heirs had a twisted sense of humor. I picked up the binoculars again, now more relaxed, almost amused by my earlier paranoia. But then, as I watched, the mannequin moved its head. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its face toward where I was, and it looked at me directly, through the binoculars, as if it knew exactly where I was, and it smiled. It wasn't a mannequin. I dropped the binoculars and closed my curtains abruptly, my heart racing uncontrollably. Since that night, I haven't opened the curtains after sunset. During the day, I open them a bit, just to let light in, but I avoid looking toward the window across from me. But curiosity can sometimes be stronger than fear. A week ago, during the day, I looked over there. The figure was still there, but now it was closer to the window, as if it had taken a step forward. Yesterday, I looked again. It was pressed against the glass, with its hands pressed against the window, looking directly at my apartment. This morning, when I left the building to go to work, I couldn't help it. I looked up at that fourth-floor window. The figure was no longer inside. It was on the balcony, outside, in the open air, and for the first time, I could see it completely. It was tall, thin, dressed in dark, old clothes. Its face was pale, almost gray, and it was staring at me as I walked down the street. Now, every time I go out, I feel it watching me, from above, waiting. I don't know what that thing is. I don't know what it wants, but every day it's a little closer. Story 3. The Message in the Mirror. I'm 32 years old. I live alone, and I work from home as a programmer. My routine is quite simple and predictable. I get up, work, eat something quick, keep working, and before bed, I take a shower. It's my way of disconnecting from the day, of relaxing before getting into bed. My apartment's bathroom is small but functional. It has a shower with a glass door, a sink, and a large mirror above it. It's an old mirror, probably original to the building, which is over 30 years old. It has some moisture stains in the corners, but it serves its purpose. All of this is important because what I'm about to tell is related to that mirror. Exactly a month and a half ago, after my nightly shower, I noticed something strange. The mirror was completely fogged up from the steam, as always, but there was something written on it. Someone had run a finger through the steam, forming letters. It said, "Behind you." I turned around immediately, my heart racing. The bathroom was empty, the door closed. There was no one but me. I wiped the message away with my hand, thinking that maybe I had written it myself without realizing. Sometimes, when you're tired, you do things automatically that you don't remember, but it disturbed me. I slept badly that night. 2 days later, I showered again before bed. I got out, dried off, and when I looked at the fogged mirror, there was another message. "I'm watching you." This time, I was scared. I checked the whole bathroom before getting in the shower. The windows were locked, the door closed. It was impossible for anyone to have entered. After the shower, the message was still there, as if it wrote itself while I was under the water. I bought a small camera, and installed it in the bathroom, pointing at the mirror. That night, I showered as usual. When I got out, I checked the mirror. No message. Maybe it really was my imagination, I thought, relieved. But when I checked the camera recording, I felt the floor move under my feet. In the video, while I was in the shower, the mirror gradually fogged up, and then, out of nowhere, an invisible finger began to write in the vapor. I know you're recording. There was no one, just the finger writing, line by line, until completing the message. I removed the camera. I didn't want to keep seeing that. For a week, I avoided showering at night. I did it during the day, with the door open, with all the lights on. But one night, I came home exhausted from the gym. I was sweaty, tired. I needed a shower. It was already 11 at night. It'll just be quick, I told myself. I got in the shower, trying not to think about the messages, about the recording. The hot water relaxed me. I closed my eyes. When I got out and opened my eyes, the mirror had a new message. Longer this time. You never left. You're still in the shower. I stood frozen, staring at those words. What did that mean? Slowly, afraid of what I might see, I turned my head toward the shower behind me. Through the fogged glass, I could make out a silhouette. There was someone inside the shower, standing exactly where I had been a moment ago. The figure was dark, blurry from the steam, but it was there, motionless. And then it raised a hand, slowly, and began to write on the shower glass from inside. The letters appeared backwards, but I could read them. Wake up, I screamed and ran out of the bathroom. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily. It had been a dream, a horrible nightmare. The clock showed 3:47 a.m. I was in my bed. It had all been a dream. I got up trembling and went to the kitchen to get water. I tried to calm down. It had just been a very vivid nightmare. But when I passed by the bathroom, I noticed the door was ajar, and there was light inside. I didn't remember leaving the light on. I peeked in carefully. The mirror still had steam, as if someone had recently taken a shower, and on it, written with a finger, it said, "Nice try." Story 4. The Forest Path. Every morning I go running. It's been my routine for 5 years. I get up at 6, put on my sneakers, and run the same path that goes through the forest near my house. It's 3 kilometers there and 3 back. It takes me approximately 40 minutes total. It's a quiet path. Few people use it so early. Occasionally I pass another runner or someone walking their dog, but most of the time I'm alone with my thoughts and the sound of my footsteps on the dirt. I knew that path by heart. Every tree, every curve, every stone, or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, while running, I noticed something strange. There was a detour I didn't remember seeing before. A small trail that branched off from the main path and went deeper into the forest. I should have noticed it before. I passed by there every day, but there it was, as if it had appeared out of nowhere. I didn't give it much thought. Forests change. Vegetation grows. Maybe it had always been there, and I just hadn't noticed it. I continued my normal route and went home. But the next day, when I passed by the same place, the detour was still there, and this time, there was something new. A wooden sign stuck in the ground. It said, "Shortcut, 1.5 kilometers." I stopped to look at it. A shortcut. If that was true, I could save myself half a kilometer, get home faster. But something about that sign seemed strange to me. The wood was old, weathered. The letters were roughly hand-carved. It didn't look like an official park sign. I decided not to take it. I continued my usual route. For the next 3 days, every time I passed by there, I looked at the detour. The sign was still there. Shortcut, 1.5 kilometers. Curiosity started eating at me. Was it really a shortcut? Where did it lead? On the 5th day, I decided to take it. I turned onto the narrow trail. The trees were denser here, blocking more light. The path was loose dirt with protruding roots. I had to slow down. I ran for a few minutes. The trail wound between the trees, went down a small slope, crossed a dry stream, and then I arrived at a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a house. No, it wasn't exactly a house. It was more like an old cabin with rotten wood and broken windows. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. This didn't make sense. I knew this forest. There had never been a structure here. I approached carefully. The cabin door was ajar, hanging from a single hinge. "Hello," I called. "Is anyone here?" Silence. I pushed the door. It creaked loudly. The interior was dark, but I could make out some furniture covered in dust, a table, an overturned chair, and on the back wall, something that made me step back. There were photos, dozens of photos, pinned to the wall with thumbtacks. And they were all of people running through the forest, through this forest, on the path I used. I moved closer, my heart pounding hard. The photos were old, faded. They showed different people over the years, all running, all taken from the same perspective, as if someone had photographed them from the trees. And then I saw the last photo on the wall. It was recent, in color. It was me, running on the main path, taken just a few days ago. I ran out of that cabin without looking back. I returned to the trail, trying to find the main path, but the trail seemed different now, longer, more confusing. I ran for what seemed like an eternity, until I finally found the main path and left the forest. When I got home, I called the police. I told them about the cabin, about the photos. They came. I took them to the forest. I showed them where the detour was, but there was nothing. The trail wasn't there. The sign wasn't there. Just the main path I knew. There's no cabin in this forest, the officer told me. And according to park records, there never has been. I stopped running on that path. Now I run in the city, among buildings and cars. But sometimes, when I pass by the forest entrance, I can see the sign standing there. Shortcut, 1.5 kilometers, waiting for me.